I plan to, first of all, start with the Arab Spring a little bit, but then now I think of skipping that very quickly, so that I just mention a bit details, perhaps, about what happened in the Arab world in terms of its importance to Turkey, actually. So with a Turkish perspective, let's say, of course, it's not so simple, homogeneous, and unified, so not so easy to make. But let me start with this. So, yes, the thing we call as Arab Spring is actually something that has its parts in many different countries in the region, in the MENA region, let's say Middle East and North Africa. But we haven't discussed about them all in our Turkish media and the public opinion, public discussion, etc. So, for instance, the first country that took the floor actually for these demonstrations, revolts, was Tunisia. But the Tunisian case was not much of a discussion in Turkey, for instance, even though many analysts, especially in the western part of the world, and also the party of the government in Tunisia itself, says that it has certain similarities with the Turkish case. So the Tunisian example is actually important for Turkey because certain similarities are offered, but we haven't discussed that very much in the Turkish media or public opinion. So let me just say a few words about this similarity that is expressed between Tunisia and Turkey, the Tunisian case and the Turkish case. So the thing here is, as you might be familiar with, so after the fall of Ben Ali and then the free parliamentary elections in Tunisia, Ennahda was the party that won the elections. So now Tunisia is ruled by a coalition government, but Ennahda is the first party that came out of the elections with a victory. And Ennahda defines itself as a moderate Islamic party and always makes a reference to AKP, the ruling party in Turkey, actually. So this is, of course, the first similarity that is usually formed between Tunisian and the Turkish cases. The ruling parties, they seem to have similar discourses in the sense that they say, they refer to religion, let's say, but they don't claim to be Islamist anyhow. They claim to be moderates all the time. And they make certain promises to the electorate, the public actually, that they are actually different from the Islamist parties in the region in general. So another similarity between Tunisia and Turkey is that both countries have a long history of secularism, tough secularism actually. That's almost authoritarian, perhaps. And now they are ruled by parties that are inspired by political Islam. So not Islamist, but let's say inspired by it. And Ennahda, as I said, makes a reference to the Turkish case, the ruling party in Turkey from time to time. So we have a kind of similarity here, a kind of relation. But as I said, we don't really much discuss about the Tunisian case in Turkey. So which cases do we discuss about the most? Libya, of course, especially at the times of action, let's say in Libya, because of course the international actors decided to take a stance against Gaddafi, so they took some response, and Turkey as a member of NATO had to be with them somehow. So that was a big discussion in Turkey. We discussed it in the media, the public opinion. And now, of course, the case of Syria is a big debate because, again, the international actors, the Western countries, NATO again, they plan to take a kind of response to Bashar Assad. And the Prime Minister Erdogan, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, is also really strict about his response to Assad. But of course, the public opinion in general, we have some questions in mind. The Turkish public in general has certain questions in mind, in the sense that going into a war or a kind of intervention in Syria is not something that's very much encouraged really by the Turkish public, because of course we have some concerns about it. So it's never easy to take an intervention, a kind of war in a different country, and we believe that there would be certain economic and political problems that would be reflected back on the Turkish public. So not really so willing. The Turkish public opinion in general is not really so willing in terms of taking an action against Assad, really. So the general opinion in Turkey is like, well, if the international actors want to do something, we should do it all together, and it should not be Turkey that's taking the action, actually. So the Libyan case and the Syrian case has been discussed in Turkey, still being discussed in Turkey a lot, because we are about to take a kind of action practically. And of course, Egypt. So Egypt is, I think, an important case for the whole world, perhaps, I don't know, but it is very important for the Western powers as well, especially the US, of course. So in the times of Mubarak, Egypt was a great ally of US, and of course, it was very important for the Israeli existence in the region as well. So in this Israeli-Palestinian problem, for instance, of course, Egypt was playing a very important role and was supporting, actually, or providing a safe ground for Israel against the Palestinian issue. But now, of course, there is this concern that the post-Mubarak time Egypt would not be so friendly and supportive towards the Israeli government in this respect. So this is a big concern for the West, of course, but Turkey also cares about Egypt a lot, as Egypt is a very big country of the region, has always been very important and active in the region. So the next power, the next political power in Egypt is important for Turkey, for Turkish relations with the other Arab countries, its relations to Israel. So we care about Egypt and what's going to happen there very much. So let me then continue with some general things about the Arab revolts. So what were the major causes of these revolts, demonstrations, protests, and what is for the future? So I think the discussion actually revolves around this future issue, that many people have certain expectations or certain guesses and certain, of course, concerns that frighten them about the future of the region. And the same is true for Turkey and the Turkish public opinion as well. So with respect to the causes of the riots, the first thing I think we should all repeat at least is this: well, all these demonstrations, these revolts, they were not really something very new. So these people in the Arab world, they were unhappy with their leaders, with their living conditions for a long period of time, and certain protests were taking place from time to time in most of these countries. But what is actually special with this period that we call as Arab Spring is actually that these demonstrations or these protests now took place all together, so in all these different countries at the same time. So this is something really special for this period. But the analysts on the region, they say, well, this was actually an old story. So many grievances, unhappiness, problems were taking place in the region long ago. So starting with 1980s, perhaps at least we can say that, there was a kind of economic, political, and even social stagnation in the region. So the problems started to appear with 1980s. And then with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, there was an event, that was an incident that made many Arabs, many Muslims actually, to question, so what happened, why did it happen, so what was the reason, etc. So kind of soul searching, many questions they asked among each other, because of course this was an incident that made them question many things at the same time, because this influenced their lives directly. So many Muslims, many Arabs were directly influenced by this incident. So at that time, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Western world was calling for change in the region. The intellectuals were doing the same. So there was perhaps a hope for change, but it didn't take place. So, of course, the reason directly was the authoritarian leaders in the region, the dictators, who did not want any change at all. So the first thing they considered important was the status quo, actually. So they were trying to protect it and nothing else. And of course, the US intervention on Iraq, for instance, was a good reason for them. So what they said to those who wanted change was, see, so the Western world, they talk about change, and what they mean by change is actually this. So now that was a very good reason for them to resist the demands for change. So these economic and political problems, they were already there, of course, starting with 1980s even. And then we had the global economic crisis of 2008. So the economic problems became even more important. And for instance, the oil prices fell, and this affected not only the poor people in the Arab world, but also the middle class as well. So then overall, considering all these things together, the first thing seems to be actually the economic problem. So inflation, or the drop in the living standards, and of course, unemployment for the young people. So in the region, the young people below the age of 30 constitute more than half of the population in some of the countries. So a very young population in the region. And these young people who were even educated, highly educated, could not really find jobs. So the first incident that took place in Tunisia that started all this thing we called as Arab Spring was that this Bouazizi set himself on fire. So he was a young person, educated, but unemployed. So this unemployment, the economic problems, seems to be a very important factor. Another thing is, yes, these people had their grievances, problems, and they did not really have a state official that they could complain about, that they would talk to. So this oppression by the state and even ignorance by the state officials was another problem. And when they wanted to discuss about these problems among themselves on the internet, let's say social media, etc., what they faced was again oppression by the state, even censorship on the internet. So overall, they couldn't really have much hope for the future, very big problems. And what they could do was actually perhaps start these demonstrations and revolts so that they could really get more. So this was actually the reason that when they started these revolts, most of the dictators started to stop them with some concessions. But actually they were not satisfied. So first of all, they wanted something really important, that the dictators had to leave. I can make this work, but actually later on, I will try to show you some slides that have some numbers and graphics. Okay. By then,
it doesn't move from
no, not actually. So I can move there when I'm going to show those statistics, perhaps, the graphs. Yeah, so not now, it's not so important at the moment, but okay, later on. When I show the graphs, I'll move there, perhaps. So the thing is, here, for instance, in the Middle East, there was a survey in 2011, and the people were asked about the major problems they have. And what we found out was 21% said economic problems is the major problem in the region. But when this question was asked directly for the country of the respondent, so what's the main problem of your country, it was 40% saying that it is the economic problems. So I think it's clear. Of course, another problem is the long-ruling dictators in the region. So in Libya, it's, of course, Gaddafi, he was there more than 40 years. Same with Oman. In Yemen, it's more than 30 years. In Egypt, again, almost 30 years of Mubarak rule. In Tunisia, it was almost 25 years. So all these long rules by dictators, of course, made the young people feel that they were politically inefficacious. So they couldn't really make their voices heard. They couldn't really shape the political system or the government they have in their own country. So I was in Egypt, for instance, just 2 months before the revolution took place, and there I was talking with people of my age, around 30. So what they directly said was, enough with Mubarak, because he was there when we were born, and now we have our own children, and he is still ruling. So they wanted a change. That was so simple, and they wanted their voices to be heard, of course. So what about the future? So now what happened in these countries? So we had the Tunisian and the Egyptian examples, for instance, where we already had the parliamentary elections. And in those countries, of course, as I said in the Tunisian example, it is Ennahda, this moderate Islamic party. And in Egypt, it's the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists, the party of the Salafists, that got the majority of the seats. So when we talk about the future of the Arab Spring, one of the first things that come into discussion is the role of Islamists. So are they going to rule these countries and indeed take everything back to its previous position? So is the main question I think many people have in mind. And what I suggest in terms of this actually is, well, many survey data suggest that the people in this region, in Middle East and North Africa, they seem to, yes, prefer some religious leaders because they are themselves religious as well. But at the same time, they really find democracy very important, and they also find certain rights, freedoms, like freedom of expression and freedom of religion very important as well. So last month, we hosted the Egyptian ambassador to Turkey in our university. He was talking about the latest developments in Egypt. And one thing he said was, well, actually, it's something expected that in a country where religious people are the majority, actually, that religion takes a certain role in politics, because most probably the rulers are religious people as well. But the thing here, or the sensitive point here, is that the system, the regime, should not turn into a theocratic one. So there we need these freedoms to be protected. And I believe that we should believe in these people who took place in Tahrir Square, who could send Mubarak, can also limit, or in a sense, keep an eye on the new rulers, the Islamists, if they are the Islamists as well. So what about Turkey in all this picture? So I think it has two different dimensions. So the first dimension I want to talk about is the Turkish public opinion on the Arab Spring. And then the second one is the perceptions of Turkey in the Middle East. So two different dimensions to it. The first one, starting with the Turkish public opinion, of course here we have to, from time to time at least, refer to the social divisions within Turkey as well. So what kind of a social and political grouping, let's say, we have at the moment in Turkey? So we have the religious conservative people, or religiously sensitive conservative people, mostly the supporters of the ruling AKP party. And then on the other hand, we have the secularists, who are really concerned with where actually Turkey is leading at the moment, with AKP so powerful, and of course the Prime Minister Erdogan so powerful. So they are really uncomfortable with the current situation in Turkey. And the nationalists, they are closer, really close to the secularists, because they are also concerned about the future of Turkey and also about certain national values that we have to protect, according to them, and which, according to them, again, AKP, the ruling party, doesn't really protect. And then we have the liberals, of course, somewhere in between. So they try to stand more objective, and they try to evaluate both camps, and they criticize the government whenever they find appropriate and then appreciate it whenever they think that the government really takes an important step in terms of democratizing Turkey or westernizing it, let's say. So the same groups, of course, have different perspectives with respect to the Arab Spring as well. So this religiously sensitive, conservative people, let's say, so they seem to be really happy with the situation in the Arab world, that their Muslim brothers in the region, that they really managed something, that they at least got rid of their dictators in the region. So they are moving to democracy, perhaps with some problems, but it's okay. And they are also, of course, very happy with the role the Turkish government is to play in the region. So they support the prime minister, they support the ruling party, and they really believe that it's really good and important to have a major role, an important role in the region in all this transition period. They also see that, of course, the importance of Turkey is increasing in the region. So now many Arabs appreciate the Turkish state and Turkish government. They know more about Turkey. Of course, this cultural export of the TV series, the Turkish TV series, plays an important role in this respect as well. So if Turkey acts as a model, yes, it has its economic dimensions, political dimensions, but I think now it plays a it has a cultural perspective dimension as well. So most of the TV series in Turkey are exported to the Arab world, and they are really very much loved by the Arab people. So for these religiously sensitive, conservative people, everything seems to be fine, and they really encourage the government to take a more active role in the region, and they also encourage the Arab people to go further with their revolutions, actually. The secularists, on the other hand, with the nationalists, of course, together, let's say, they are suspicious about all this process. And actually, the idea they have in mind is all this is a scenario written by US, more or less, that US has certain plans with the region. It aims to reorganize, restructure the region according to its own aims and plans. And actually, in this scenario, Turkey plays an important role for US as well. So they want, the US wants Turkey to be like the role, the head, let's say, in the region. And of course, this is a part of Islamicizing Turkey as well, because once this issue of moderate Islam that some people talk about AKP and Turkey, like Turkey is a good example because it has a moderate Islamic party, and so the Arab people, they feel closer to Turkey now. This is, of course, an issue of suspicion for the secularists because they don't want to be called as a moderate Islamic state because we are a secular state, and this is for sure. So they're not happy with this labeling at all. They try to refuse it always. And the liberals, of course, again trying to be objective. They are happy on the one hand that certain things are changing in the Arab world, but of course they're aware of the problems that might be faced in the region as well. So they know the advantages and disadvantages at the same time and try to consider them all. So what about the perception of Turkey in the Middle East? So just a couple of words before I show you some graphs and statistics about the Middle Eastern public opinion about Turkey. Of course, when we discuss about the increasing importance of Turkey in the region, we have to refer back to this Davos meeting where the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan had a tough debate actually with Peres, the Israeli president, in 2009. So this was actually the time when the Arab public opinion, the people in the youth, especially in the Muslim world, recognized the Turkish prime minister and Turkey as an important actor, because at the time in their mind, they were thinking like this: well, we agree with him in terms of this Israeli-Palestinian issue. So of course they were concerned with the problems the Palestinian people were living, experiencing at the time, but actually the leaders of the Arab world, they were really silent about this. And for the first time, a political leader was coming out and saying something about this issue against the Israeli government, let's say. So they were really proud of Erdogan, and they were really wanting for a leader like that in their own countries as well. So that was a really very important incident that made Turkey and Turkish Prime Minister to get known in the region and to get this positive reputation in the region. And of course, the foreign policy of the AKP government in Turkey, it also helped a lot, because before that, Turkey was really more or less ignoring the region. So we didn't have much contact with the Arab world. And in the Arab world, the perception about Turkey was, well, it's an ultra-secular state. So one Egyptian friend one day told me that, well, when I visited Istanbul, I was really shocked that I could hear the call for prayer very easily. Because the image she had in mind was, yes, Turkey, as an ultra-secular country, you wouldn't even hear about this call to prayer. Of course, this is not the case, but that was the image the Arab people, the Middle Eastern people had in mind, actually, about Turkey. But with this Islamic party, moderate Islamic party in government, a prime minister referring to Islam and religion from time to time, this image in the Arab world started to change, actually. So they now started to think that, yes, Turkey, a Muslim country, has its Muslim identity, but also democratic, etc. So this perception started to change, actually. And of course, they tried to, I think at least some of them tried to take Turkey as an example and show that, well, Islam and democracy, they can coexist, they can exist together. But of course, when the Prime Minister Erdogan visited Egypt and talked about secularism, for instance, the Muslim Brotherhood changed their mind a little bit. So they were really supporting the Turkish model and Erdogan at that time. But when Erdogan said that, well, secularism is something very good and you should apply it in Egypt as well, they were not so happy, I think, with this statement, for instance. So now I have some numbers about the, lastly, before I finish, about the Middle Eastern public opinion about Turkey. So, yeah, before that? Yeah, no, the graph. Yeah, thank you. So here what we see, the question was, the respondents' ideas about some countries were asked. So a larger list was actually normally offered to the respondents, but I chose some examples here for this graph. And what we see here is 56%, no, I'm sorry, let me see. Yeah, 78% of the respondents declared that they think very positively or rather positively about Turkey. So Turkey here has the highest percentage, and followed by Palestine, Saudi Arabia, and China. I think this is interesting. But still Turkey is the first country to come that they declare they think very positively or rather positively about. And then in the second graph, the role of different actors in the Arab Spring was asked, and 56% of the respondents said that they believe Turkey played a very positive or rather positive role in the Arab Spring. And an important point here, I think, is Turkey goes over all other countries that were listed in the question, and France is the closest with just 36, so 20% higher than the second country that was offered. So the third one, I think that was the question of the day, actually. So the first question was whether Turkey could act as a model in the region or not. And when the respondents were asked this question, 61% said yes, 22% said no, and 13 remained indecisive. So 60% of the respondents saying that Turkey can act as a successful model for the Arab world. So then the question was, why can Turkey act as a model? So what were the reasons stated by the respondents who claimed that Turkey could act as a model? So 32 comes from the democratic regime Turkey has. So Again, we see that these people, they really want democracy. And again, they see that Turkey could manage it with its own problems, of course. And then 25 comes from economy. So the Turkish economic development, let's say, the well situation of the Turkish economy. It's also stated as an important factor. Then 23 comes from the Muslim identity Turkey has. So perhaps they couldn't really get a model from the Western world because a non-Muslim country would be a bit far away for the people in the Arab world. But Turkey, a Muslim country, a democratic regime, and a developed economy serves as a good model. So the secular political structure, I think this is important as well, has been stated by just 17%. So again, perhaps we can take the lesson from here that the first consideration at least, or the major aim for these people is not really a secular political structure. And then, so I said that 60% said Turkey could act as a model, but 22 said Turkey cannot act as a model. So what were the reasons stated by those people then? So the last graph says that Turkey cannot act as a model because, so these are the reasons again. So 23% say Turkey is not Muslim enough. So compared to these countries and these people, Turkey is not Muslim enough. 16% says Turkey has close relations with the West. 13 say secular political structure. So what we see here is for 13%, it's even a disadvantage. So rather than an advantage, the secular political structure Turkey has is a negative factor in terms of Turkey being a model. Then 9% say it's non-Arab, and 7% say it's the history of emperorship. So what comes out of all these graphs and things? Well, the general opinion, the general public perception about Turkey seems to be really positive, but not that everyone is sure about Turkey enacting as a really successful model for the region. So some people really have certain considerations about Turkey, taking Turkey as an example. And I think this, again, not so Muslim identity, and perhaps Turkey's close ties with West seem to be the major reasons why they have some hesitations in mind. So thank you for now.